A reporter raised her hand. "Mr. Park, how do you feel about the flight attendant being fired?" Min-jun chose his words carefully. "I don't take any joy in someone losing their job. But actions have consequences. Her behavior was wrong. It violated company policy. It violated basic human decency. The airline had to respond appropriately," another reporter called out. "Do you think her actions were racially motivated?" "I can't speak to what was in her heart," Min-jun said. "I can only speak to her actions. And her actions showed bias. Whether that bias was conscious or unconscious, I don't know. But it was there. And it was wrong." "What do you want to come from this situation?" another reporter asked. This was the question Min-jun had been waiting for. "I want awareness. I want people to understand that this happens. I want bystanders to feel empowered to speak up when they see injustice. I want companies to take discrimination seriously and to train their employees properly. And I want everyone to examine their own biases. We all have them. The question is whether we acknowledge them and work to overcome them." He took a few more questions. Then he thanked everyone and left. The reporters immediately began filing their stories. By evening, his statement would be on every major news channel. His words would be analyzed and discussed. Some would praise him. Some would criticize him. But his message would be out there. Back in his office, Min-jun felt exhausted. Young-soo brought him a cup of green tea. "You did well," Young-soo said. "I hope so," Min-jun replied. His phone buzzed. It was a text from Jin-hee Kim, the elderly woman from the flight. Min-jun had given her his card and told her to stay in touch. The message read, "I saw your press conference. You spoke with wisdom and grace. Your parents must be very proud. I am proud to have met you." Min-jun smiled. He texted back, "Thank you. Your courage on that flight meant everything. I hope you're enjoying your time with your daughter." Another message came in, this one from James Cooper. "Hey man, I saw the news. I'm sorry this turned into such a big thing. But you're handling it perfectly. Seriously, if you ever need anything, I'm here." Min-jun appreciated both messages. They reminded him that good people existed. People who cared. People who would stand up for what was right. Over the next week, the story continued to spread. Other people began sharing their own experiences with discrimination while traveling. A movement started online. People used hashtags like #TravelingWhileBlack and Share Your Story. Thousands of accounts poured in. Stories of being questioned, searched, detained, treated with suspicion. It was overwhelming. But it was also important. These stories needed to be told. Several other airlines announced they would review their training programs. They would implement new policies. They would create better reporting systems for discrimination complaints. Min-jun's experience had sparked something larger than he imagined. But not everyone was supportive. Some people defended Sarah Mitchell. They said she made an honest mistake. They said Min-jun was being too sensitive. They said he was using his wealth and platform to ruin a working woman's life. These comments hurt, but Min-jun had expected them. There were always people who did not want to see the truth, who did not want to acknowledge that discrimination existed. Friday morning came. Hae-won-jung arrived at Min-jun's office exactly at 10 o'clock. She came alone. No assistants, no lawyers, just herself. Min-jun appreciated that. It showed she was serious about having a real conversation. They sat in Min-jun's office. Young-soo brought them coffee and then left, closing the door behind him. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Hae-won began. "Mr. Park, I've been thinking about your experience constantly since it happened. And I've been thinking about all the other experiences that probably happened on our flights that we never heard about." "I'm sure there have been many," Min-jun said. "I'm sure there have been many," Min-jun said. "Most people don't have the platform I have. Most people don't have other passengers willing to defend them. They just endure it and move on. Because what choice do they have?" Hae-won nodded slowly. "That's what keeps me up at night. How many passengers have we failed? How many times has this happened without us knowing?" She paused. "I've been CEO for 3 years. Before that, I worked in operations. In my entire career with this airline, I never witnessed discrimination myself. And I think that's part of the problem. If you don't see it, it's easy to believe it doesn't exist. But it does exist," Min-jun said. "It exists in ways both big and small." "I know that now," Hae-won said. "And I want to fix it. But I need help. Our standard training programs clearly aren't working. We need something better, something real." Min-jun leaned forward. Can I ask you something? When you hired Sarah Mitchell 12 years ago, do you think she was openly racist? Do you think she woke up that morning planning to discriminate against me? Hey-Wan thought about the question. No, I don't think so. I think she probably believed she treated everyone equally. I think she probably didn't even recognize her own bias. Exactly, Minjun said. That's the problem with unconscious bias. People don't recognize it in themselves. They think they're being fair when they're not. Sarah probably had all kinds of reasons in her mind for why she treated me differently. She probably told herself I looked suspicious, or that I seemed like I was in the wrong seat, or that I wasn't following some unwritten rule she had about first-class behavior. So how do we fix that? Hae-won asked. Minjun stood up and walked to his window. He looked out at the city below. Training helps, but it can't just be a one-time video that employees watch and forget. It has to be ongoing, regular, part of the company culture. What else? Hae-won was taking notes on her phone. You need clear consequences, Minjun continued. Employees need to know that discrimination won't be tolerated, but you also need to make it safe for employees to call it out when they see it. David Chen saw what Sarah was doing. He knew it was wrong, but he stayed silent because he was afraid of making trouble with a senior employee. We should have systems in place for that, Hae-won said, almost to herself. You also need diverse leadership, Minjun added, at every level. If everyone in management looks the same, thinks the same, comes from the same background, they'll have the same blind spots. You need people who can recognize discrimination because they've experienced it. Hae-won nodded. You're right. Our executive team is not diverse enough. That needs to change. They talked for another hour. Minjun shared ideas. Hae-won asked questions. They discussed training programs, reporting systems, accountability measures, and cultural change. By the end of the conversation, they had the outline of a real plan. Would you be willing to consult with us on this? Hae-won asked. I know you're busy running your own company, but we could really use your expertise. Minjun considered it. He was busy, very busy, but this mattered. This could prevent other people from experiencing what he experienced. I'll help, he said finally, but I can't do it alone. We need to bring in experts, people who study bias and discrimination, people who understand the psychology behind it. And we need to include flight attendants in the conversation. They're the ones on the front lines. They need to be part of creating the solution. Agreed, Hae-won said. Let's do it right. They shook hands. As Hae-won left, she turned back at the door. Thank you, Mr. Park, not just for helping us, but for handling this entire situation with such grace. You could have destroyed us in the media. You still could, but instead you're trying to create positive change. That says a lot about your character. After she left, Minjun sat alone in his office. He thought about the past week, the flight, the confrontation, the viral story, the press conference. And now this. He had not wanted any of it. But maybe some things were meant to happen. Maybe this was his chance to make a real difference. His phone rang. It was his mother calling from their home in Queens. Hi, Mom, Minjun answered in Korean. Minjun, I saw the news. Are you okay? His mother's voice was full of concern. I'm fine, Mom, really. What happened on that plane made me so angry. How dare she treat my son that way? Minjun smiled despite himself. His mother was small but fierce. She had immigrated to America 35 years ago with nothing. She had worked 3 jobs to support the family while Minjun and his sister were growing up. She had sacrificed everything so they could have better opportunities. I'm okay, Mom. Other passengers helped me. Good people spoke up. You should have called her out immediately. You're too nice, Minjun. Too forgiving. Being angry doesn't fix things, Mom. Working for change fixes things. His mother was quiet for a moment. Then she sighed. You get that from your father. Always trying to fix things. Always trying to make things better. Her voice softened. I'm proud of you, son. How you handled this. What you said at your press conference. Your father would be proud too. Minjun felt tears sting his eyes. His father had passed away 5 years ago. Cancer. Minjun still missed him every day. Thanks, Mom. Come for dinner this Sunday. Bring Youngsu. I'll make bulgogi. I'll be there. After hanging up, Minjun allowed himself a moment to just feel everything. The exhaustion, the frustration, the sadness, but also the hope. Because good things were happening too. People were having conversations. Companies were making changes. Awareness was spreading. The alarm on Min-Jun Park's phone went off at 4 in the morning. He reached over and turned it off with a tired hand. The room was still dark. He had only slept 3 hours after finishing a late video conference with his team in Seoul. Min-Jun sat up slowly and rubbed his eyes. He was tired, but he had an important meeting in Los Angeles that afternoon. He could not miss this flight. Min-Jun walked to the bathroom and looked at himself in the mirror. His eyes were red from lack of sleep. His face looked older than his 38 years. Building a tech company worth billions of dollars had taken everything from him. Long nights, endless meetings, constant stress, but he had done it. He had created something amazing, something that changed how people use technology around the world. He took a quick shower and got dressed. Min-Jun did not think much about his clothes. He grabbed his favorite pair of jeans from the closet. They were old and comfortable. He pulled on a simple gray hoodie over his t-shirt. His sneakers were worn at the edges. He looked like any regular person heading to the airport. That was exactly how Min-Jun liked it. Min-Jun had learned long ago that expensive suits and fancy watches did not make him happy. He had those things in his closet. He wore them when he needed to. But when he traveled alone, he preferred comfort. He preferred to be himself. He grabbed his small backpack and his phone. He checked his wallet, his driver's license, his credit cards. His boarding pass was already on his phone. Everything was ready. The car service arrived right on time. The driver helped him with his bag, and they drove through the empty New York streets toward the airport. Min-Jun looked out the window at the city. Even at this early hour, some lights were on. Some people were already awake, already working. The city never really slept. They arrived at JFK Airport 45 minutes later. Min-Jun thanked the driver and walked into the terminal. The airport was busier than he expected. Even at 5:30 in the morning, hundreds of people filled the halls. Business travelers with rolling bags, families heading on vacation, everyone going somewhere. Min-Jun went through security without any problems. He had TSA pre-check, so the line moved quickly. He collected his bag and his phone and headed toward his gate. The flight to Los Angeles would take about 6 hours. He planned to sleep for most of it. He needed the rest before his afternoon meeting. He stopped at a coffee shop near his gate. The woman behind the counter smiled at him warmly. She did not know who he was. She just saw another tired traveler who needed caffeine. Min-Jun ordered a large black coffee and a plain bagel. He paid with his credit card and found a seat near the window. He watched the planes take off and land while he ate his simple breakfast. The gate agent announced that first-class passengers could board. Min-Jun picked up his backpack and got in line. He noticed a few people looking at him strangely. A woman in an expensive business suit gave him a quick glance. Her expression said she thought he was in the wrong line. Min-Jun was used to this. He did not let it bother him anymore. He handed his phone to the gate agent. She scanned his boarding pass and smiled. "Good morning, Mr. Park. Welcome aboard. You're in seat 2A today." "Thank you," Min-Jun said quietly. He walked down the jet bridge and entered the plane. The first-class cabin was beautiful. Large leather seats, extra legroom, soft lighting. Min-Jun found his seat by the window and settled in. He put his backpack under the seat in front of him. He pulled out a book he had been reading. A novel about a detective solving crimes in Tokyo. He was halfway through it and enjoying the story. More passengers began boarding. Min-Jun looked up occasionally, but mostly focused on his book. He was tired and wanted to relax before the flight took off. Then he noticed her. The flight attendant working the first-class cabin. Her name tag said Sarah Mitchell. She was a tall woman with blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun. She smiled brightly at each passenger as they found their seats. She helped an elderly man put his bag in the overhead bin. She brought a pillow to a woman in a business suit. She was friendly and professional with everyone. But when Sarah's eyes landed on Min-Jun, her smile disappeared. Her face changed. Her friendly expression turned cold. She walked toward him slowly. Her eyes looked at him up and down. She stared at his old jeans, his worn hoodie, his simple backpack. "Excuse me, sir," Sarah said. Her voice was different now. Not warm, not friendly. "Can I see your boarding pass?" Min-Jun looked up from his book. "Of course," he said calmly. He pulled out his phone and showed her the digital boarding pass on his screen. Sarah looked at it carefully. Too carefully. She studied it like she was looking for something wrong. "This seat is 2A, she said slowly. Yes, Minjun replied. That's my seat. Sarah's lips pressed together in a thin line. She looked at the boarding pass again. Then she looked at Minjun again. Her eyes were full of doubt. Are you sure you're in the right section? Economy is toward the back of the plane. Minjun felt a familiar feeling in his chest. He had experienced this before. Many times, people who looked at him and made assumptions. People who thought they knew who he was based on his clothes, based on how he looked, based on their own limited ideas about who belonged where. I'm in the right seat, Minjun said quietly. His voice was calm but firm. This is my assigned seat. First class. 2A. Sarah stood there for a moment. She did not apologize. She did not smile. She just turned and walked away without another word. Minjun watched her go. He saw her whisper something to another flight attendant near the front of the plane. They both looked back at him. Then they turned away. Minjun took a deep breath. He opened his book again, but he could not focus on the words. He knew this flight was going to be difficult. He could feel it. The way Sarah had looked at him. The way she had questioned him. The tone of her voice. It was all too familiar. Other passengers continued to board. A businessman in an expensive suit sat across the aisle from Minjun. Sarah rushed over to him immediately. Good morning, sir. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Orange juice? A newspaper? The businessman smiled. Coffee would be great, black, 2 sugars. Of course. I'll bring that right away. Sarah's voice was bright and cheerful again. She hurried off to get his coffee. Minjun noticed everything. The difference in her tone. The difference in her behavior. The way she treated the businessman in the suit versus how she treated him. It was clear. It was obvious. But Minjun said nothing, not yet. He just watched and waited. Sarah returned quickly with the businessman's coffee. She placed it carefully on his tray table. Here you are, sir. Is there anything else I can get you? No, this is perfect. Thank you, the businessman said. Sarah smiled widely. Just let me know if you need anything at all. She walked past Minjun without looking at him. She did not offer him anything. No coffee, no juice, no newspaper, nothing. She treated him like he was invisible. Or worse, like he did not belong there. Minjun pulled out his phone. He opened his notes app. He began typing. He wrote down the time, the date, the flight number, the name on Sarah's tag. He wrote down exactly what had happened. Every detail, every word, every look. He had learned to document these situations. Evidence mattered. Truth mattered. The plane began to fill up. Soon all the first-class seats were taken. The captain's voice came over the speaker. He welcomed everyone aboard. He gave information about the flight time and the weather in Los Angeles. Minjun barely listened. He was thinking about the long flight ahead. 6 hours of whatever treatment Sarah decided to give him. The plane pushed back from the gate. The engine started. They began to taxi toward the runway. Minjun looked out the window at the airport getting smaller. The sun was just starting to rise. The sky was turning from black to dark blue. It should have been a peaceful moment. A beautiful moment. But Minjun could not enjoy it. He could only think about the disrespect he had already experienced. And he wondered what else was coming. The plane climbed into the sky. Minjun felt the familiar pressure in his ears as they gained altitude. He looked out the window and watched New York City disappear below the clouds. In a few minutes, they would be at cruising altitude. Then the seatbelt sign would turn off. Then the real service would begin. Minjun wondered how Sarah would treat him next. He did not have to wait long to find out. The seatbelt sign dinged off. Sarah's voice came over the speaker in the first-class cabin. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We've reached our cruising altitude. You're now free to move about the cabin. We'll be coming through shortly with our breakfast service. Please let us know if we can get you anything. Her voice was sweet and professional. Minjun wondered if that voice would stay sweet when she spoke to him. Sarah appeared in the aisle with a tray of drinks. She stopped at each row with the same bright smile. Good morning. What can I get you to drink this morning? She served the businessman across from Minjun first. Your coffee, sir. And would you like anything else? We have fresh orange juice, tomato juice, water, or champagne. Orange juice sounds great, the businessman said. Excellent choice. Sarah poured the juice into a real glass. A nice glass. She placed it on his tray table carefully. Enjoy. Then she moved to the next row. An elderly couple sat together. Sarah leaned in close to them. Good morning. What can I get for you both? The elderly woman smiled. Just water for me, dear. And I'll have coffee, her husband said, coming right up. Sarah served them with the same warm energy. Real glasses. Careful placement. A genuine smile. Then she came to Minjun's row. Her smile faded. Her warm expression became flat. She did not lean in. She did not make eye contact. She just stood there with the tray. Drink? She asked, one word. That was all. Her tone was cold and impatient. Coffee, please, Minjun said politely. Black, Sarah poured the coffee. But she did not use a real glass. She grabbed a plastic cup from under the cart, the kind of cup they used in economy class. She filled it and placed it roughly on Minjun's tray table. Some of the coffee splashed over the side. She did not apologize. She did not offer a napkin. She just moved on to the next row. Minjun stared at the plastic cup. He looked across the aisle at the businessman's real glass. He looked at the couple behind him. They had real glasses too. Everyone in first class had real glasses. Everyone except him. He picked up his phone again. He added this detail to his notes. Time. What happened? The plastic cup? The spilled coffee? He took a photo of the cup. Evidence. Across the aisle, an elderly Korean woman had been watching everything. Her name was Jin-hee Kim. She was 72 years old and traveling to Los Angeles to visit her daughter. Jin-hee had kind eyes and silver hair. She had been watching how Sarah treated Minjun since they boarded. Now she had seen enough. Jin-hee leaned across the aisle toward Minjun. Excuse me, she said softly in Korean. Are you okay? Minjun looked at her in surprise. He had not expected anyone to notice. He had not expected anyone to care. Yes, thank you, he replied in Korean. I'm fine, Jin-hee shook her head. That flight attendant is treating you very badly. That's not right. Everyone in first class should get the same service. I know, Minjun said quietly. But it's okay. I'm used to it. Jin-hee's face showed sadness. You shouldn't have to be used to it. No one should be treated this way. Before Minjun could respond, Sarah returned with the breakfast carts. Another flight attendant was with her now, a younger man named David Chen. David looked uncomfortable. He had noticed Sarah's behavior too, but he did not know what to do about it. Sarah was senior to him. She had worked for the airline for 12 years. He had only been flying for 2 years. Sarah and David moved through the cabin taking breakfast orders. Sarah spoke to each passenger with enthusiasm. Good morning. Today we have 3 options for breakfast. We have the smoked salmon with cream cheese and bagel. We have the vegetable omelet with fruit. Or we have the Belgian waffles with berries and whipped cream. What would you like? Each passenger received the full description. Each passenger received her full attention. Each passenger except Minjun. When Sarah reached his row, she did not give him the full description. She did not smile. She just said, "What do you want?" "What are the options?" Minjun asked calmly. Sarah sighed like he was bothering her. "Salmon, omelet, or waffles?" "I'll have the omelet, please," Minjun said. Sarah wrote it down without looking at him. She moved on to the next row. There, her voice became cheerful again. Good morning. Today we have 3 wonderful options for breakfast. David brought Minjun his omelet 10 minutes later. At least David was kind. He placed the tray gently on the table. Here you go, sir. Enjoy your meal. Thank you, Minjun said. David gave him a small smile and moved on. Minjun looked down at his breakfast. The omelet was cold. He could tell it had been sitting for a while. He cut into it with his fork. It was rubbery and dry. He looked around at the other passengers. Their food looked hot and fresh. Steam rose from their plates. Minjun ate a few bites anyway. He was hungry. He had not eaten much at the airport. But the cold omelet was hard to finish. He drank his coffee from the plastic cup. It was lukewarm now. He thought about asking for a fresh cup, but he decided against it. He did not want to deal with Sarah's attitude again. After breakfast, Sarah collected the trays. When she reached Minjun, she grabbed his tray without a word. She did not ask if he was finished. She did not ask if he needed anything else. She just took the tray and walked away. The businessman across the aisle pressed his call button. Sarah rushed over immediately. Yes, sir? What can I do for you? Could I get another cup of coffee, please? Of course. Right away. Sarah hurried to get his coffee. She returned in less than a minute with a fresh cup in a real glass. Here you are. Anything else? No, that's perfect. Thank you so much. My pleasure. Sarah beamed at him. Min-jun reached up and pressed his call button. The light above his seat turned on. He waited. 1 minute passed. 2 minutes. 3 minutes. Sarah walked past him twice. She saw the light. She ignored it. Jin-hee watched this happen. Her face grew angry. She could not stay quiet anymore. When Sarah walked past again, Jin-hee called out to her. "Excuse me, miss." Sarah stopped and turned. Her smile appeared instantly. "Yes, ma'am? How can I help you?" Jin-hee pointed at Min-jun's call light. "That gentleman has been waiting for several minutes. His light is on. I think he needs something." Sarah looked at the light like she was seeing it for the first time. "Oh, I didn't notice." Her voice was flat. She walked over to Min-jun slowly. "Yes? Could I get some water, please?" Min-jun asked politely. "We're out of bottled water in first class," Sarah said quickly. "I can bring you a cup from the back." "That's fine." "Thank you." Sarah walked away. She did not hurry. Min-jun watched her stop and chat with other passengers. She laughed with the businessman. She adjusted a pillow for the elderly couple. She took her time. Finally, after 10 minutes, she brought him a small plastic cup of water. She placed it on his tray without a word and walked away. Jin-hee had been counting the minutes. 10 minutes for a cup of water, she said loud enough for people around her to hear. This is unacceptable. The businessman across the aisle heard her. He had been half asleep, but now he was paying attention. He looked at Min-jun. Then he looked at Sarah. He started to notice the pattern too. Min-jun pulled out his phone again. He updated his notes, the wait time for water, the plastic cup again, the cold omelet, the ignored call button. Everything was documented. An hour into the flight, Min-jun started to feel cold. The air conditioning was strong near his seat. Other passengers had blankets and pillows. Min-jun had neither. He saw David walking through the cabin and caught his attention. "Excuse me," Min-jun said. "Could I get a blanket, please?" David smiled. "Of course, sir. Let me grab one for you." David went to the storage area at the front of first class. Sarah was standing there organizing supplies. David said something to her. Sarah glanced back at Min-jun. She shook her head. David said something else. Sarah shook her head again. She spoke firmly. David's shoulders dropped. He walked back to Min-jun looking uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, sir," David said quietly. "We're out of blankets in first class." Min-jun nodded slowly. "Okay, thank you for checking." David walked away looking guilty. He knew there were blankets. He had seen them. But Sarah had told him no. She had told him the blankets were for other passengers. 5 minutes later, Sarah walked past carrying blankets. She stopped at the elderly couple's row. "I thought you might want an extra blanket," she said warmly. "It can get cold on these flights." The elderly woman had not asked for a blanket, but Sarah gave her one anyway, and a pillow. She tucked them in with care. Jin-hee could not believe what she was seeing. She pressed her own call button. Sarah came over immediately. "Yes, ma'am? What do you need?" "I need to speak with the head flight attendant," Jin-hee said firmly. Sarah's expression changed. "Is there a problem?" "Yes, there is a problem. A big problem. What seems to be the issue?" Sarah's voice became defensive. Jin-hee pointed at Min-jun. "You have been treating that young man very poorly since this flight began. Different service. Plastic cups, cold food, ignored call buttons, lies about blankets. I have been watching everything, and I am not the only one watching." Several other passengers were listening now. They turned to look. Sarah's face turned red. She clearly had not expected to be called out. Sarah stood frozen in the aisle. Her face had turned from red to pale. Other passengers were staring now. The businessman across from Min-jun sat up straighter in his seat. He had been half asleep earlier, but now he was fully awake and paying attention. The elderly couple behind Jin-hee looked concerned. Even the passengers in the rows ahead were turning around to see what was happening. "Ma'am, I assure you I treat all passengers equally," Sarah said. Her voice was tight and controlled, but Min-jun could hear the panic underneath. Jin-hee shook her head firmly. "No, you do not. I have watched you for 2 hours now. You have been kind and helpful to everyone else, but you have been cold and rude to that young man. Why? What has he done to deserve such treatment?" Sarah's mouth opened, but no words came out. She looked around at all the watching faces. She was trapped. She knew it. I don't know what you're talking about. If there has been any misunderstanding, there is no misunderstanding, Jin-hee interrupted. Her voice was strong, despite her age. You gave everyone real glasses except him. Everyone got hot breakfast except him. Everyone got blankets except him. You ignored his call button for 10 minutes. These are facts, not misunderstandings. The businessman across the aisle spoke up now. His name was James Cooper. He was 45 years old and worked in venture capital in Manhattan. He had been on thousands of flights. He knew what good service looked like, and he knew what discrimination looked like too. She's right, James said loudly. I've been sitting right here. I've seen everything. The different treatment is obvious. Sarah turned to face James. She tried to smile, but it came out wrong. Sir, I can assure you, you can't assure me of anything. James cut her off. His voice was angry now. I've watched you fawn over me since I sat down. Coffee and real china. Hot breakfast. Pillows I didn't even ask for. Meanwhile, this gentleman has been treated like he doesn't belong here. And we both know why. Sarah's eyes went wide. I don't appreciate what you're implying. I'm not implying anything, James said. I'm stating facts. More passengers began speaking up. A woman 2 rows ahead turned around. I noticed it too. I thought maybe I was imagining things, but I wasn't, was I? No, you weren't, Jin-hee confirmed. Min-jun had been sitting quietly through all of this. He had not said a word. He had not defended himself. He had not accused Sarah of anything. He had simply endured. But now he felt he needed to speak. Please, Min-jun said softly. Everyone, please. It's okay. Jin-hee looked at him with surprise. It is not okay. You paid for first-class service. You deserve first-class service. I know, Min-jun said calmly, and I appreciate you standing up for me. Really, I do. But I don't want to cause trouble. James shook his head in disbelief. You're not causing trouble. She is. He pointed at Sarah. Her behavior is causing trouble. Sarah's hands were shaking now. She could feel control slipping away from her. I'm going to get the head flight attendant, she said quickly. She turned and rushed toward the front of the plane. The cabin fell silent for a moment. Then people started talking quietly to each other. Min-jun could hear the whispers. He could feel the eyes on him. This was exactly what he had wanted to avoid. Attention, drama, conflict. He just wanted to get to Los Angeles. He just wanted to attend his meeting. But instead, his morning flight had turned into a scene. Jin-hee reached across the aisle and gently touched Min-jun's arm. I am sorry if I made things worse, she said in Korean. But I could not stay silent. What she did was wrong. You didn't make things worse, Min-jun replied in Korean. You stood up for what was right. Thank you. 2 minutes later, Sarah returned. Behind her was a woman in a different uniform. Her name tag read, Soo-jin Lee, lead flight attendant. Soo-jin was in her mid-40s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had worked for the airline for 20 years. She had seen many situations. But the tension in this first-class cabin was thick enough to cut. Good morning, everyone, Soo-jin said in a calm, professional voice. I understand there has been some concern about service. Can someone please tell me what happened? Multiple passengers started talking at once. Soo-jin held up her hand. One at a time, please. She looked at Jin-hee. Ma'am, you called for me. Can you explain what you observed? Jin-hee nodded. She spoke clearly and carefully. She described everything she had seen since boarding. The plastic cup instead of glass. The cold omelet, the ignored call button, the lie about blankets. She gave specific details, times, examples. Other passengers nodded in agreement as she spoke. When Jin-hee finished, Soo-jin turned to James. Sir, you also witnessed these events? I did, James confirmed. And I should have spoken up sooner. I'm ashamed that I didn't. Soo-jin nodded slowly. She turned to look at Min-jun. Her expression was professional, but her eyes showed concern. Sir, is this account accurate? Min-jun hesitated. Part of him wanted to just say no and end this whole situation. But another part of him knew that staying silent would not fix anything. It would not prevent this from happening to someone else. Someone who might not have Jin-hee or James to defend them. Yes, Min-jun said quietly. It's accurate. Soo-jin's jaw tightened. She turned to Sarah. Sarah, is this true? Did these things happen? Sarah's face was red again. There may have been some miscommunication. I was busy. We had a full first-class cabin. Sometimes service gets delayed. That doesn't explain the plastic cup, Soo-jin said firmly, or the cold breakfast, or lying about blankets. I didn't lie, Sarah protested. I thought we were out. But you gave blankets to other passengers right after, Soo-jin pointed out. Passengers who didn't even request them. Sarah had no answer for that. She stood there with her mouth slightly open, searching for words that would not come. Soo-jin took a deep breath. Sarah, please go to the back galley. We'll discuss this in private after I speak with the passenger. Sarah looked like she wanted to argue, but she could see there was no point. She walked quickly toward the back of the plane. Her head was down, her shoulders were tight. As she passed Min-jun, she did not look at him. After Sarah left, Soo-jin knelt down in the aisle next to Min-jun's seat. This surprised him. She did not stand over him. She brought herself to his level. It was a small gesture, but it meant something. Sir, I am deeply sorry for how you were treated on this flight, Soo-jin said. Her voice was sincere. This airline has strict policies about equal treatment for all passengers. What happened here violated those policies. It violated basic human decency. And for that, I apologize. Min-jun nodded. Thank you. I appreciate that. Is there anything I can do to make this right? Anything you need? Soo-jin asked. Min-jun thought for a moment. A real cup of coffee would be nice, and maybe a blanket if one is available. Soo-jin smiled sadly. Of course, and those should have been provided 2 hours ago. I'll bring them immediately. She paused. I'd also like to offer you a voucher for a future flight, and I'll need to file a report about this incident. May I have your name? Min-jun Park, he said. Soo-jin wrote it down on a small notepad. Thank you, Mr. Park. And again, I am truly sorry. She stood up and addressed the other first-class passengers. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the disruption. We will make sure the rest of your flight is comfortable. If anyone needs anything, please don't hesitate to ask. I'll be personally overseeing service for the remainder of the flight. Soo-jin went to get Min-jun his coffee and blanket. David appeared a moment later. He looked very uncomfortable. He approached Min-jun carefully. Sir, David said quietly, I want to apologize too. I saw what was happening. I should have said something. I should have stepped in. I'm sorry I didn't. Min-jun looked at the young flight attendant. David could not be more than 25 years old. He looked genuinely upset. It's hard to speak up sometimes, Min-jun said, especially when someone has more authority than you. That's not an excuse, David said. What happened to you was wrong. I knew it was wrong. But I stayed quiet because I didn't want to cause problems with Sarah. That makes me part of the problem. Min-jun was impressed by David's honesty. The fact that you recognize that means something. Learn from this. Next time, speak up. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. David nodded seriously. I will, I promise. Soo-jin returned with a tray. On it was a cup of coffee in proper china, not plastic, a small plate with cookies, a bottle of water with a real glass, and a soft blanket with a pillow. She arranged everything on Min-jun's tray table with care. If you need anything else, anything at all, just press your call button. I'll respond immediately, Soo-jin said. Thank you, Min-jun replied. As Soo-jin walked away to check on other passengers, Jin-hee smiled at Min-jun. Better late than never, she said. Min-jun smiled back. Thank you again for speaking up. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did, Jin-hee said firmly. We all have a responsibility to speak up when we see injustice. If good people stay silent, nothing changes. James leaned across the aisle. She's absolutely right. And I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. I noticed the different treatment, but I told myself it wasn't my business. That was cowardly of me. You spoke up eventually, Minjun said. That matters. Does this happen to you a lot? James asked. Then he winced. Sorry, that's probably a personal question. It's okay, Minjun said. And yes, it happens more than you might think. Not always this obvious. But it happens. People make assumptions based on how you look, what you're wearing, the color of your skin. James shook his head sadly. That's terrible. No one should have to deal with that. No, they shouldn't, Minjun agreed. But many people do. Every day. The conversation died down after that. Passengers returned to their books, their movies, their sleep. But the atmosphere in first class had changed. Everyone was more aware now, more conscious. They had witnessed something uncomfortable, something that made them think. The rest of the flight passed more smoothly. Sujin kept her promise. She personally handled the first-class service for the remaining 4 hours. She was attentive to everyone, professional, kind. This was how service should be. This was what Minjun had paid for. What everyone had paid for. Minjun tried to focus on his book, but his mind kept wandering. He thought about Sarah. He wondered what would happen to her. He wondered if she realized why her actions were wrong, or if she just felt like she had been caught. There was a difference, a big difference. He also thought about Jinhee and James, 2 strangers who had stood up for him, who had used their voices when his own voice had not been enough. That meant something. It reminded Minjun that good people existed, people who would speak up when they saw injustice. As the plane began its descent into Los Angeles, the captain's voice came over the speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our initial descent into Los Angeles International Airport. We should be on the ground in about 20 minutes. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for landing. Minjun put away his book and looked out the window. He could see the California coast, the blue water, the sprawl of the city. Somewhere down there was the conference center where his meeting would be held. Somewhere down there was the life he had built, the company he had created, the success he had earned through years of hard work. But up here on this plane, none of that had mattered. Sarah had not seen a successful businessman. She had not seen a tech entrepreneur. She had not seen someone who had built something important. She had just seen his jeans, his hoodie, his skin, and she had decided he did not belong. The plane touched down smoothly. The passengers applauded. It was something people did sometimes when a flight landed safely. Minjun clapped along with everyone else. He was grateful to be on the ground. Grateful the flight was over. The plane taxied to the gate. The seatbelt sign turned off. Passengers stood up and began gathering their things. Minjun stayed seated. He was in no hurry. His assistant would be waiting for him at the gate. His meeting was not for another 3 hours. He had time. Sujin appeared beside his seat. Mr. Park, I wanted to speak with you before you depart. Minjun looked up at her. Of course. I want you to know that I'll be filing a detailed report about what happened today. This incident will be thoroughly investigated. The airline takes discrimination very seriously. I appreciate that, Minjun said. I'd also like to give you my card, Sujin continued. She handed him a business card. If you need anything else, if you want to provide additional information, please contact me directly. Minjun took the card and slipped it into his pocket. Thank you. And here is a voucher for your next flight, Sujin said, handing him an envelope. It's not enough to make up for what you experienced, but it's something. You don't have to do that, Minjun said. I want to, Sujin insisted. Again, I am truly sorry this happened. Minjun nodded. He stood up and gathered his backpack. Other passengers were moving slowly toward the exit. Jinhee was gathering her things across the aisle. Minjun caught her eye. Safe travels, he said in Korean. And thank you again. Jinhee smiled warmly. Safe travels to you too, young man. Keep being strong. Keep being dignified. The world needs more people like you. Her words touched Minjun more than he expected. He felt a lump in his throat. Thank you. That means a lot. James was waiting near the front of the cabin. As Minjun approached, James extended his hand. Hey, I just wanted to say again how sorry I am, and how impressed I was by your composure. A lot of people would have lost their temper. Minjun shook his hand. Losing my temper wouldn't have helped anything. It would have just given her an excuse to say I was the problem. James nodded thoughtfully. You're right. That's very wise. He paused. Can I ask what you do? For work, I mean. I work in technology, Minjun said simply. Oh yeah? What kind of technology? Software, development, that kind of thing. Minjun kept his answer vague. He did not like to talk about his company with strangers. It always changed how people treated him. He preferred to just be a regular person. Cool, James said. Well, if you're ever looking for funding or connections in the venture capital world, here's my card. He handed Minjun a business card. James Cooper, Cooper Ventures. We invest in tech startups. Minjun took the card politely. Thank you. Take care, man. And again, you handled that situation with a lot of grace. Minjun made his way off the plane. As he walked through the jet bridge, he saw Sarah standing near the gate. She was talking to Sujin. Her face was pale. Her hands were clasped in front of her. She looked small and afraid. When she saw Minjun approaching, she turned away quickly. Minjun did not feel satisfaction seeing her like that. He did not feel anger either. He just felt tired. Tired of having to deal with situations like this. Tired of being judged. Tired of having to prove he belonged in spaces he had every right to be in. As he entered the terminal, he heard a familiar voice. Mr. Park. Minjun turned to see his assistant Young-soo Choi walking quickly toward him. Young-soo was 30 years old, dressed in an expensive tailored suit and carrying a leather briefcase. He looked like he had stepped out of a business magazine. Good morning, Young-soo, Minjun said. Good morning, sir. How was your flight? Young-soo asked as he reached Minjun's side. Long, Minjun said simply. Young-soo did not press for details. He knew his boss well enough to know when to ask questions and when to stay quiet. The car is waiting outside. Your meeting at the convention center starts at 2 o'clock. We have plenty of time. Would you like to stop somewhere for lunch? That sounds good, Minjun said. They started walking toward the exit. Behind them, some of the passengers from the flight were also heading toward baggage claim. James Cooper was walking with his phone to his ear, already talking business. Jin-hee was being greeted by a younger woman who must have been her daughter. They hugged warmly. Then James suddenly stopped walking. His face went pale. He looked at his phone screen in shock. He turned and stared at Minjun and Young-soo walking ahead of him. His mouth fell open. One of James's colleagues had just sent him a text. It was a link to a Forbes article. The headline read, Tech billionaire Minjun Park to speak at LA Innovation Summit today. Below the headline was a photo. A professional photo of Minjun in a suit at a conference, but it was definitely the same person. The same face. The same eyes. James had just spent 6 hours on a plane, sitting across from one of the most successful tech entrepreneurs in the world, and he had no idea. James looked at the business card Minjun had handed him earlier. Then he looked at his own card, the one he had given to Minjun. He had offered to help Minjun find venture capital funding. He had offered his connections to a man who was worth billions, to a man whose company James had actually tried to invest in 3 years ago, but could not because the valuation was already too high. James felt his face go red. He felt foolish, but more than that, he felt angry. Angry at Sarah for how she had treated someone who deserved respect regardless of his wealth. Angry at himself for not speaking up sooner. Angry at a system that judged people so quickly based on their appearance. Another passenger from the flight, a woman named Susan who had been sitting a few rows behind Minjun, had also recognized him. She pulled out her phone and quickly opened Twitter. She started typing. Just got off a flight where a flight attendant treated a black passenger terribly. Plastic cups instead of glass. Cold food. Ignored his call button. Other passengers had to defend him. Turns out he's Minjun Park, the tech billionaire. But even if he wasn't rich, he deserved better. This is why we need to speak up when we see discrimination. She hit send. The tweet would go up immediately. In a few hours, it would start spreading. Other passengers would see it. Some would respond with their own accounts. The story would begin to grow, but Minjun knew nothing about this yet. He was walking through the airport with Young-soo, discussing his upcoming meeting. Young-soo was briefing him on who would be there, what topics would be discussed, what questions Minjun might face. Also, sir, Young-soo said as they approached the exit, your interview with Tech today is scheduled for tomorrow morning at the hotel. They want to discuss the company's expansion plans in Asia. That's fine, Minjun said. Did you send them the background materials? Yes, sir. Everything they requested. They stepped outside into the bright California sunshine. A black car was waiting at the curb. The driver stood by the door. When he saw Minjun and Young-soo approaching, he quickly opened the back door. Good morning, Mr. Park, the driver said respectfully. Good morning, Minjun replied. He climbed into the car. Young-soo got in beside him. As the car pulled away from the airport, Minjun looked out the window at the palm trees and the blue sky. Los Angeles always felt different from New York, warmer, more spread out, more relaxed. He liked it here. Sir, if you don't mind my asking, you look tired. Was it just a long flight or did something happen? Young-soo asked carefully. Minjun considered how much to share. Young-soo was not just his assistant. He was also a friend. They had worked together for 6 years. Young-soo had been with the company since the early days when it was just 5 people in a small office. He had seen the company grow. He had seen Minjun grow into his role as CEO. There was an incident on the flight, Minjun said finally. One of the flight attendants treated me poorly. Other passengers noticed. They spoke up. It became a situation. Young-soo's face darkened. What do you mean she treated you poorly? Minjun described what happened. The plastic cups. The cold breakfast. The ignored call button. The lie about blankets. Young-soo listened with a tight jaw. That's unacceptable, Young-soo said angrily. Did you get her name? We should file a complaint. We should contact the airline's management. The head flight attendant already said she would file a report, Minjun said. And I documented everything. I have times, details, photos. Good, Young-soo said. This should not go unpunished. I'm not looking for punishment, Minjun said quietly. I just want people to understand that this kind of thing happens. It happens to me. It happens to lots of people. And it needs to stop. Young-soo was quiet for a moment. Then he said, You're more forgiving than I would be. It's not about forgiveness, Minjun explained. It's about change. Getting angry feels good in the moment. But it doesn't create lasting change. Education creates change. Awareness creates change. You're right, Young-soo admitted. But it still makes me angry. Me too, Minjun said softly. Me too. The car drove through the Los Angeles traffic toward their lunch destination. Minjun closed his eyes and leaned his head back against the seat. He was tired, so tired, not just from the early morning flight, but from having to always be so composed, so calm, so dignified, even when people treated him like he did not belong. 3 days passed before the story truly exploded. Susan's tweet had started it. Other passengers from the flight had added their own accounts. They shared photos. They shared details. They named the airline. Within 24 hours, the tweet had been shared 10,000 times. Within 48 hours, it had been shared 100,000 times. News outlets picked up the story. First the smaller online sites, then the bigger ones. CNN, NBC, Fox News, the New York Times. They all wanted to cover it. Tech billionaire discriminated against on flight. Passengers defend black. Entrepreneur from racist treatment. Airline investigates flight attendant after incident. Minjun was back in New York when the story went viral. He was in his office on the 32nd floor of a building in Manhattan. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the city. His desk was clean and organized. Photos of his family sat on one corner. His parents, his younger sister, his grandmother in Seoul. Young-soo knocked on the open office door. Sir, you need to see this. He came in holding his tablet. The story from the flight. It's everywhere. Minjun looked up from the report he was reading. What do you mean everywhere? Young-soo showed him the tablet screen. It showed trending topics on Twitter. Minjun saw his name. He saw the airline's name. He saw hashtags like Justice for Minjun and End Discrimination. Oh no, Minjun said quietly. It gets bigger, Young-soo said. He swiped to show him news articles. Dozens of them. And your phone is going to start ringing any minute. Media outlets are calling the office. They all want interviews. As if on cue, Minjun's phone rang. He looked at the screen. It was a number he did not recognize. He let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. Another unknown number, and again. You need to make a statement, Young-soo said. The public wants to hear from you. Minjun rubbed his face with both hands. This was exactly what he had not wanted. He had not wanted attention. He had not wanted to become a story. He had just wanted fair treatment on a flight, but now it had become something much bigger than that. Set up a press conference, Min-jun said finally. Tomorrow afternoon. I'll make a statement and take a few questions. Yes, sir, Young-soo said. He turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, I think this could be a good thing. This could start important conversations. Min-jun nodded. I hope so. While Min-jun was preparing his response, the airline was dealing with its own crisis. The CEO, Hae-won-young, was in her office watching the news coverage. She had been with the airline for 25 years. She had worked her way up from a gate agent to regional manager to vice president and finally to CEO. She had seen the industry change. She had seen many challenges. But this was different. This was a crisis that could damage the airline's reputation for years. Her phone rang. It was the head of public relations. Ms. Jung, we need to respond immediately. The story is getting worse by the hour. People are calling for boycotts. Our stock price is dropping. I know, Hae-won said. I'm watching it. Have we completed the investigation? Yes, Soo-jin Lee's report is complete. Sarah Mitchell violated multiple company policies. The evidence is clear. Multiple passenger statements confirm the discriminatory treatment. What's our recommendation? Hae-won asked. Termination, immediate, and a public statement from you apologizing to Mr. Park and all affected passengers. Hae-won was quiet for a moment. She thought about Sarah Mitchell. She thought about the woman's 12 years with the airline. She thought about whether this was one terrible mistake or a pattern of behavior. Then she thought about all the passengers who had experienced discrimination, but had not had other passengers to defend them, had not had the platform to tell their stories. Do it, Hae-won said. Terminate her employment. And draft the statement. I'll review it in an hour. Yes, ma'am. Hae-won hung up and made another call. This one to Min-jun's office. Young-soo answered. This is Young-soo Choi, assistant to Mr. Park. Good morning, Mr. Choi. This is Hae-won Jung, CEO of the airline. I need to speak with Mr. Park directly if he's available. Young-soo put her on hold and walked to Min-jun's office. Sir, the airline CEO is on the line. She wants to speak with you. Min-jun took a deep breath. Put her through. A moment later, Hae-won's voice came through the speaker. Mr. Park, thank you for taking my call. I'm Hae-won Jung, CEO of the airline. I wanted to personally apologize for what happened to you on your flight 3 days ago. Thank you, Min-jun said simply. I want you to know we've completed our investigation. Hae-won continued. The flight attendant, Sarah Mitchell, has been terminated. Her actions violated our policies and our values. We have zero tolerance for discrimination. Min-jun was quiet for a moment. He had expected some kind of punishment, but hearing it stated so directly still felt strange. A woman had lost her job because of how she treated him. That carried weight. I appreciate you telling me, Min-jun said. I'd also like to meet with you in person if you're willing, Hae-won said. Not for publicity. Not for cameras. Just a private conversation. I want to hear your perspective. And I want to discuss how we can make sure this never happens again. Min-jun was surprised. You want my input on airline policies? Yes, Hae-won said firmly. You experienced something that should never happen. You saw our failures firsthand. Your perspective would be valuable. And frankly, we need help. We need to do better. Min-jun thought about it. He could say no. He could make his statement tomorrow and move on with his life. But Hae-won sounded sincere. And if there was a chance to create real change, should he not take it? All right, Min-jun agreed. Let's meet. Thank you, Hae-won said. Shall we say Friday morning? 10 o'clock? At your office or ours? Mine is fine. Perfect. I'll see you then, Mr. Park. And again, I am deeply sorry for what you experienced. After the call ended, Min-jun sat back in his chair. Young-soo appeared in the doorway. That seemed to go well, Young-soo observed. She wants to meet, to discuss how to prevent this from happening again. Will you help them? I think I have to, Min-jun said. If I can use this situation to create real change, then maybe some good can come from it. The next day, Min-jun held his press conference. The room was packed with reporters. Cameras lined the back wall. Microphones covered the podium. Min-jun stood in front of them all wearing a simple suit and tie. He looked calm but tired. Thank you all for coming, he began. 3 days ago, I experienced discrimination on a flight from New York to Los Angeles. A flight attendant treated me differently than other passengers based on my appearance. Other passengers witnessed this treatment and spoke up. I'm grateful to them for their courage. He paused and looked around the room. I want to be very clear about something. This is not an isolated incident. This kind of discrimination happens every day to millions of people. Black people, brown people, poor people, anyone who doesn't fit someone's narrow idea of who belongs in certain spaces. What made my situation different is that I had witnesses who spoke up, and I had a platform to share my story. 2 weeks later, the airline announced major policy changes. New training programs would be implemented immediately. All employees would go through comprehensive bias training every 6 months. A new reporting system would allow both passengers and employees to report discrimination anonymously. Consequences for violations would be clear and consistently enforced. And the airline committed to diversifying its leadership team within the next year. Minjun worked with a team of experts to develop the new training program. They created realistic scenarios. They brought in people to share their experiences. They made it interactive and meaningful. Not just a box to check, but real education that could change minds. David Chen volunteered to be part of the first group to go through the new training. Afterward, he reached out to Minjun. Mr. Park, I just finished the training program you helped create. I wanted to thank you. It opened my eyes to so many things I never thought about before, and it gave me the tools to speak up next time I see something wrong. That's exactly what we hoped for, Minjun replied. Thank you for being open to learning. Jin Hee Kim also stayed in touch. She became an advocate in her own community. She started giving talks at churches and community centers about the importance of speaking up when you witness injustice. She used her experience on the flight as an example. She became a voice for action. You inspired me, she told Minjun during one of their phone calls. I'm 72 years old. I thought I was too old to make a difference, but speaking up on that flight showed me that anyone can make a difference at any age. James Cooper kept his promise too. He became more aware, more conscious, more willing to use his privilege to support others. He started reviewing his own company's policies. He pushed for more diversity in the startups they funded. He recognized that he had power and he needed to use it for good. 3 months after the incident, Minjun boarded another flight, this time to San Francisco for a tech conference. He dressed the same way, jeans, hoodie, comfortable clothes. He would not change who he was because of what happened. As he boarded the plane and found his first-class seat, a flight attendant greeted him warmly. Good morning, sir. Welcome aboard. I'm Priya. Can I get you anything before we take off? Just water, please, Minjun said. Priya brought him water in a real glass. She brought him a menu. She treated him with the same respect and warmth she showed every other passenger. This was how it should be. This was normal. But Minjun knew it was also the result of change. The result of his experience and the work that followed. During the flight, Minjun worked on his laptop. He was preparing a speech for the conference. The topic was about using technology to solve social problems. As he wrote, he included a section about his experience on the flight, about how individual actions could spark larger movements, about how technology companies had a responsibility to address bias in their products and their cultures. When the plane landed in San Francisco, Priya thanked him for flying with them. Have a wonderful trip, Mr. Park, Minjun smiled. Thank you, Priya. I appreciate the excellent service. As he walked through the airport, his phone buzzed. It was an email from Haewon Jung. The subject line read, Results from first quarter after policy changes. Minjun opened the email. Haewon had sent him data. Reports of discrimination incidents had actually increased. At first glance, this seemed bad. But as Minjun read further, he understood. Haewon explained that the increase was because people now felt safe reporting incidents. The new system was working. Problems that had always existed were finally being documented and addressed. Even better, the data showed how incidents were being handled. Quick responses, real consequences. Follow up with affected passengers. The airline was taking it seriously. Employee surveys showed increased awareness about bias. Flight attendants reported feeling more confident about addressing discrimination when they saw it. Change was happening. Real measurable change. Minjun replied to the email. This is excellent news. The fact that people feel comfortable reporting incidents means we're creating a culture of accountability. Keep up the good work. At the conference that afternoon, Min-jun gave his speech to a packed room. He told his story, not for sympathy, not for attention, but as an example of how one moment could lead to broader change if people chose to act rather than stay silent. "I didn't want to be discriminated against on that flight," Min-jun said to the audience. "But since it happened, I had a choice. I could be bitter and angry, or I could try to create something positive from it. I chose the latter, not because I'm particularly noble, but because I believe that's how real change happens, not through anger alone, but through action, through education, through people choosing to do better." The audience gave him a standing ovation. Afterward, dozens of people came up to share their own stories, to thank him, to tell him they were inspired. A young black woman who was starting her own tech company shook his hand with tears in her eyes. "Thank you for speaking up," she said. "Thank you for using your platform. People like me, we face this kind of thing all the time, but no one listens. Having someone like you talk about it, it makes people pay attention." Min-jun felt the weight of responsibility. "Don't thank me. Thank Jin-hee Kim and James Cooper. They're the ones who spoke up when I couldn't. And then use your voice too. Share your stories. The more people speak up, the harder it becomes to ignore." That evening, Min-jun sat in his hotel room overlooking the San Francisco Bay. He thought about how much had changed in 3 months. An airline had reformed its policies. Thousands of employees had gone through new training. Other airlines had followed suit. Conversations were happening in boardrooms and living rooms across the country. People were more aware, more conscious, more willing to speak up, but he also knew the work was not finished. One person's experience and one company's policy changes could not fix systemic problems that had existed for generations. Discrimination still happened every day. Bias still existed in countless forms. There was so much more work to do. Min-jun pulled out his phone and opened his notes app. The same app where he had documented every detail of that flight 3 months ago. He scrolled through his notes. Then he started a new entry. "Today I spoke to 500 people about discrimination and change. Several people shared their own stories with me. I was reminded that this fight is bigger than one flight or one airline. It's about creating a world where everyone is treated with dignity and respect regardless of how they look, what they wear, or where they come from. I'm committed to continuing this work. Not as a victim, but as someone who has a platform and a responsibility to use it well." He saved the note and put his phone down. Tomorrow he would fly back to New York. There would be more meetings, more work with the airline, more opportunities to speak about these issues. But tonight, he allowed himself to feel satisfied with the progress they had made. It was not perfect, but it was real. And sometimes real progress was the best you could hope for. Min-jun thought about Sarah Mitchell. He wondered what she was doing now. He hoped she had learned from this experience. He hoped she understood why her actions were wrong. He hoped she would do better in whatever job she had next. Because that was the point of all this, not punishment for punishment's sake, but growth, learning, change. He thought about Jin-hee Kim and hoped she was well. He thought about James Cooper and hoped he was keeping his promises. He thought about David Chen and all the flight attendants going through the new training. He thought about all the passengers who would fly in the future and receive fair treatment because people had chosen to speak up and demand change. And he thought about his father. What would his father say about all this? Min-jun smiled. His father would probably say the same thing his mother had said, that he was too forgiving, too focused on fixing things. But he would also be proud that his son had turned a painful experience into something meaningful. The next morning, Min-jun packed his bag and headed to the airport. As he went through security, he noticed a black teenager in line ahead of him, getting pulled aside for additional screening. The TSA agent was rough and impatient. Other passengers walked through without issue. But this young man was being singled out. Min-jun watched for a moment. The old Min-jun might have looked away, might have told himself it was not his business. But not anymore. He walked over to the TSA supervisor standing nearby. "Excuse me," Min-jun said politely but firmly. "I've been watching the screening process. That young man is being treated very differently than other passengers." "Can you explain why?" The supervisor looked startled. "Sir, our agents follow strict protocols." "I understand protocols," Min-jun interrupted gently, But I also understand bias. That young man deserves the same respect as everyone else going through this line. The supervisor's face changed. Recognition flickered in his eyes. Mr. Park? The tech entrepreneur. Yes, and right now I'm just a passenger who sees something wrong. Are you going to address it? The supervisor nodded quickly. He walked over to the agent and had a quiet conversation. A moment later, the teenager was allowed to proceed normally. He looked confused but relieved. As he gathered his belongings, Min-jun caught his eye and gave him a small nod. The teenager nodded back. A moment of understanding passed between them. Min-jun continued to his gate. His flight was called shortly after. He boarded the plane, found his seat in first class, and settled in. The flight attendant greeted him warmly and professionally. The service throughout the flight was excellent, equal, fair. As the plane took off and New York City disappeared below, Min-jun opened his book. The detective novel he had been reading on that flight 3 months ago. He had never finished it. Too much had happened. Too much had changed. But now finally he could return to it. He could lose himself in a story that was not his own. At least for a few hours. But even as he read, Min-jun knew his own story was far from over. The work would continue. The conversations would continue. The push for change would continue. Because that was what it took. Not one moment of courage, but sustained effort over time. Not one person's voice, but many voices together. Not one company's policy changes, but a cultural shift across society. Min-jun Park had not asked to become a symbol of anything. He had just wanted a peaceful flight. But sometimes life gave you unexpected roles to play. And sometimes those roles came with responsibilities you could not ignore. So he would keep speaking up. Keep working for change. Keep using his platform and his privilege to make things better for everyone. Because in the end, that was what mattered most. Not wealth or success or recognition, but leaving the world a little better than you found it. One flight, one conversation, one moment of courage at a time. The end.